All right, good evening, everybody. It's Aaron Heiser with Maker's Leather Supply again, and we're going to do another sewing machine video. Okay, and this one is this is an important one, and it's something that really confuses a lot of folks, and a lot of folks really struggle with this. But it's just as easy as I hope to make it sound. Okay, I used to also be very afraid of this, and that is thread tension. Okay, a lot of the time when you get a brand new machine, the tension is extremely tight and they sew it off, they test it on some thicker material. But what if you're trying to do now some thinner material and your thread tension's not right? Okay, and when I talk about thread tension, I'm talking about this right here. Okay, so right here we have a perfect stitch. I wouldn't call it perfect, I did it, so we have a good stitch. Right here we have one where the top tension is, or the you can see the bottom, the bobbin thread up on the top of the leather, and up here you see one where the top looks okay, but on the back you can see the top thread down on the bottom. Okay, and then we'll go back to the sample stitch here where you can't see that. All right, correct tension means that you can't see the bottom, the bobbin thread up on the top, and you can't see the top thread down on the bottom. Okay, and it's really easy to adjust this, and it's really easy even to find that sweet spot. But again, I also remember when I was new to sewing machines, and it was something I really struggled with, and mainly, once again, it was because I was afraid to mess anything up. Don't be afraid to mess this thing up. It's a giant chunk of iron. You're not going to hurt it, okay? As long as you're not doing something crazy like trying to sew together bumpers or something. I mean, it's a sewing machine. You're going to do great, okay? So, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about how to make it right, okay? I'm going to reposition the camera to where it can see the machine a little bit better, and we'll get on it. All right, so this machine, once again, is the same one I used in the other two videos, the Cobra Class 18 sewing machine. I really like this machine. It's a great all-around, it is a flatbed machine. A lot of y'all have heard me say over and over that the 26 is my favorite machine. That's not necessarily true. If I could only have one sewing machine, it would be the 26. But since I have a room full of sewing machines, this is probably my favorite, okay? Now, when we're talking about thread tension, there is two different things we have to worry about. First and foremost, let's say you were sewing along and everything was sewing fine, and then all of a sudden your thread tension isn't right, okay? I wouldn't adjust any tension knobs when that happens. I would start checking my line of thread all the way back here from the cone up through the thread hole up there, checking to make sure everything's, something hadn't gotten bound up somewhere or something like that. If it persists and you don't find a problem, I would completely unthread and rethread the entire machine, maybe even put a new needle in it. And a lot of the time, that makes the gremlins go away, okay? But that's, once again, that's if you're just sewing along and all of a sudden your thread tension's not right when it was before and you didn't change anything. Now, let's say you used to be sewing some thicker stuff, but now you're trying to sew some thinner stuff, or you changed thread size, or even between brands of thread or different colors of thread, it can all affect your tension a little bit. So, how do we get it back into what it needs to be? So the first thing I do is I take my project and I set it aside, and I get some of the exact same leather that my project's made out of, same thickness, same everything, and I get my stuff right on that. I don't try to do it on my project, because then you're just going to have a bunch of sewing on it that you're upset about because the tension wasn't right. Now, there's two main places to adjust your tension. Oh, I've got a caveat. I've got one thing I need to say. I am not a properly trained sewing machine technician, guru. I don't know what to say here. But what I know is the stuff that I've picked up from other folks that maybe were properly trained. And so therefore, if I use the wrong terminology or something, or call something the wrong nomenclature, I'm very sorry. That's just what I know it as. Whether I picked that up from somewhere else or that's just the word I use to keep it okay in my simple little mind. Okay? But anyway, right here we've got a gray knob, and that is my main tensioner for my top tension. 99% of my tension issues can be fixed with this knob. Okay? So when we're going to go back to our example here. Like right here, where I can see the bottom thread up at the top, then that tells me that my top tension is too tight, and I'm going to loosen it a little bit. And that'll drop that down to where the bottom thread's not being pulled so hard towards the top. And the exact opposite of that, if I can see my top thread at the bottom, that tells me that my top thread might need to be tightened a little bit. So I'll tighten it a little bit, okay? And just like putting a nut on a bolt or something like that, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, okay? So clockwise is tighter, counterclockwise is more loose. Now, again, that solves 99% of your tension issues, as just your top thread tension. I tell people all the time when they're taking home their brand new sewing machine from the shop, do not mess with the bobbin tension unless you have to. Okay, and if you have to, then please call me first, and we'll go over everything else and make sure you actually have to. Okay, the bobbin tension is much more sensitive. Okay, when you are adjusting your top tension, generally a quarter to a half a turn at a time is what you're going to adjust, and then you'll sew 10 stitches or so, and then you'll look at it and readjust it and go from there. The bottom tensioner, that little screw right there. I mean, if I sneeze on that screw, it's going to adjust it more than I wanted. Okay, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but what I'm saying is it's much more sensitive. I try really hard not to adjust bobbin tension unless it's maybe the machine's really broken in and it's just time. You know, the spring down here is loosened up and it's just not, I can't fix it with the top tension, I guess would be the word. Okay. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. As far as, you know, what you do with your tensions, I'm going to sew a little bit here. Okay, I replace my bobbin, pull my threads up here, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about here, okay? So I'll start sewing, and as I sew, I'll do a few stitches, and then I'll tighten my top tension, then I'll do a few more stitches, I'll tighten it again, okay, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so I'm going to tighten my top tension about a half a turn. And that already was enough to really throw it off whack here, okay? So when you look down at my sewing here, sorry, new camera, new zoom problems. I'm still learning this thing. I love it, but it's different than my old one, seriously. There we go. Now we got to reposition it. Okay, so as you can see here, just that little bit, we went from good looking stitches to, oh my gosh, I can see my bottom or top tension up on top, or my bobbin stitch is up on the top. Okay, so not a problem. I'm going to come over here and create a new sew line here. It goes against everything I've ever known about sewing for me to actually screw up my tension on purpose. Excuse me, I'm still sick. All right, so what I'm going to do when you can see your bobbin on the top, so your top is too tight, it's a little bit off camera, but I'm going to just unclick it about a half a turn or a quarter of a turn here, and then I want to sew 8 or 9 stitches. You want it to be more than just 2 or 3. 2 or 3 is not enough to get the thread, you know, through the machine. Okay, and now that didn't do it. I can see the stitch is still jacked up back there. So I'm going to unscrew it a little bit more. And then I'm going to do 8 or 9 more stitches. Okay, now we're getting a little closer, but we're still not there. So I'm going to unscrew it just a little bit more, just 1/8 of a turn this time. I think we can do just a tiny bit more. And then once I think it's good, I'm going to do an entire little line here. Because what I want to do is I want to pick up my project and I want to look at the back of it. And I want to see what the back looks like. Okay, so there's the back of the last line I did. and it looks pretty good. Now that was just one layer of the leather, so I would say this is pretty good on tension right here. Okay, because when you put 2 layers under it, it's going to do even better because it's got that much more leather to pull through. A lot of the time, if you really find a great sweet spot in your tension, you don't really have to change it very much unless maybe you change your needle and your thread size. But other than that, like if you're just going from thicker to thinner and stuff on leathers, it's not an issue, because if it works on 4-ounce leather, then of course it's going to be okay on 8 ounces of leather. All right. So can't see the back of it because it's got too much stuff, too much sewing on it. So I'm going to sew this one. I'm going to make it to where both the front and the back are finished sides of leather, because that'll really show me if my tension's right or if I need to adjust it some. Okay. Now at the beginning of my stitch here, the top tension seems a little bit tight. And what that probably is me not holding my dadgum threads tightly when we started out. The back of the stitch looks fine, so I'm going to retest it on the same settings to see if it's right or if I was holding the threads wrong. There we go. So there's the front, it's that bottom line, there's the back, and that is properly tensioned, okay? So I know that you're thinking, well, that can't be it, that can't be all there is to it, but it really is. That's all there is to it. Thread tensioning really is a very simple thing, and yeah, it's just one of those things that a lot of people that are new with a sewing machine are just afraid to mess with it and try it. And again, I'm not slinging any dirt on those folks, because I was the same way. I mean, a lot of the time when I had my first sewing machine, if my thread tension wasn't right and it was an important project, I'd bust out those 2 needles and thread and start hand stitching again. And I don't want people to have to do that. I want them to know that, hey, this is a really easy thing to operate. You just can't be afraid of it. So hopefully that helps some folks. I'll be tomorrow. I'll post another video, I hope, and we'll go over some more sewing machine stuff. Have a great night.